Unfortunately, first casualty.
Here's the story of how I rode over 200 miles on my bicycle in just 2 days, what I learned, and why I'm never gonna do it again. What's going on, guys? For those of you who are new here, my name is Kevin Jubal, physician entrepreneur based in Las Vegas, formerly in plastic surgery. First off, the big question, why? Why would anyone in their right mind do this? Every year, there is an organized bike ride called Seattle to Portland, or STP. This year, because of the pandemic, it was canceled. Huge bummer. We were really looking forward to doing it, me and my friends. There's usually like 10,000 people, some crazy number of cyclists that do it, and you have two groups. The really hardcore true cyclists that do all 205 miles in just one day, which is, it's pretty metal. And the noobs, like me and my friends, who will split it up into 2 days, roughly 100 miles on each day. And we call this riding 100 miles in one day a century. So with Seattle to Portland canceled, we figured, hey, let's just do our own double century across 2 days by ourselves. What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words. So there were some things that caused me to hesitate before pulling the trigger on this. Number one being that doing endurance exercise training in this capacity increases your gut permeability. Overall, not good for your gut health, especially if you're someone like me who has a pre-existing chronic GI illness. So this is an interesting point because on one hand, yeah, you don't want to worsen your gut condition or increase the chances of being symptomatic, causing inflammation, etc. On the other hand, I hate feeling like my condition holds me back. And there have been times in the past when I have done things just to prove a point to say, hey, I am not limited. This thing is not holding me back. Was that a bit headstrong? Yeah, sure. But overall, I didn't think this was a huge deal breaker, so decided to pull the trigger. There were some other things you should keep in mind as well if you're considering this that I learned only from doing the ride, which is why I'm not gonna do it again. My friends and I started chatting around March or April, and we planned this trip to be at the end of August. It's gonna be nice weather, that's when we were all free. And we figured we'd fly into Seattle, spend a day or two there, then start the ride, and then fly back from Portland. And because we were making such a trek, right? I had some friends in Vegas, some friends in California who were flying up to Seattle. We figured, okay, 205 miles is cool, but let's add a little bit more on top. So we also did it was like 59 or 60 miles around Lake Washington as a separate ride in addition to the Seattle to Portland ride. So now there were two things to worry about. Number one, training, and number two, preparing for the actual the logistics and things like that. As for the training, ideally we would have been increasing our mileage and our frequency of rides leading up to the event. And I mostly was doing that. I mean, here's my Strava. I was increasing my mileage. I think around July, I was pretty good. And then August, I got busy with work, with Med School Insiders, with MEM, and then just totally fell off, which was not ideal. As for logistics, one of the hardest parts is actually getting your bike, if you're flying, getting it shipped to your final destination. There are a couple options here. One is to just ship it via UPS, something like that. You can use either your local bike shop or various services that will package your bike, ship it over for you, or you can fly with it yourself, or you can rent a bike at your final destination. These were all things we considered. Ultimately, we all decided to fly with our bikes. We bought or rented these bike travel suitcases where you can disassemble your bike by yourself, you put it in the suitcase, you try to protect it as best as you can. It's a little bit shady because the TSA always opens it and they tend to move your bike around and not put it back properly. So it's kind of risky in that way.
Sweet.
And then when you get to your final destination, you reassemble it, which doesn't always go totally smoothly.
Struggles of assembling bikes is sometimes we put the fork the wrong way and then the wheel doesn't go.
And then the other hard part is, okay, you're going from Seattle to Portland. How do you take your stuff with you? Proper cyclists, real cyclists would do some form of bike packing where you take your belongings, your clothes, your toiletries, your change with you. But because again, we're novices, we're noobs, we don't know what we're doing. My friend who is from Seattle, his parents live in Seattle, so they essentially drove a support vehicle for us. On 2 spots on each of the century days, they would stop and help us refuel with snacks and water and things like that. And then they would also carry our bags in the back of the truck so that when we got to the hotel, we had all of our clothes, our toiletries, and all those things.
Some more bags and snacks and stuff. And yeah, it's now like 9 a.m., 100 miles, day 1. How are we feeling, Sharif?
Feeling great.
Yeah, as I'm recounting this and telling this story, I realize how soft me and my friends are. We fly into Seattle on Saturday, that's day 1.
Coming across Seneca Street, it's a sign that on this trip we'll need to tap into Stoic fundamentals to get through it.
We just explore, don't do any cycling that day. We assemble our bikes later in the evening. Day 2 is when we do the first ride. This is 59 miles around Lake Washington. And surprisingly, this actually felt really tough. So for me and a couple friends, we hadn't been training properly. So the longest ride we had done was like 15 miles in a month or two. and ideally you want to be ramping up the frequency and total mileage. So doing 60 miles after just getting used to 15 was not easy. It actually felt pretty challenging. So much so that at the end we were thinking like, damn, how are we gonna do 2 centuries back to back if we can barely handle 60 miles? It was a beautiful ride though. There's just so much greenery and beauty, natural beauty in Seattle that we don't really get here in Las Vegas. It's a different kind of beauty here in Vegas. But because we were a little bit concerned about doing the proper century, I said, hey guys, we gotta really dial things in terms of nutrition. So we gotta eat really clean between now and the double centuries. And we also gotta sleep, prioritize sleep. So Sunday was, again, the 60 miler. We got hot pot, which was delicious. Monday was the rest day, thankfully, because we needed to recover from that first 60-mile ride. And then Tuesday and Wednesday were the 2 actual centuries. Another thing I learned recently from my bike fitter here in Las Vegas is that when the temperature gets below 70 degrees, you want to use knee warmers because your synovial fluid, it really increases in viscosity. And as you get older, then that can cause more joint issues, more wear and tear, more pain. So I'm really glad we did that because it got a little bit chilly on the first century day. And me and my buddy bought some knee warmers just to keep our knees a little bit, cozier. And then Tuesday morning around 9 a.m., we were off. Woo! We're at mile 40, another 30 to go. Feeling good, taking this nice and easy, trying to keep my heart rate around 130, maybe up to 140, not too much higher than that. That's the goal at least, but when you climb, it's hard to avoid that. Doing nutrition, around 200 calories every hour on the hour, and that's the strategy. Let's see how this works. Now the key here is slow and steady, right? We weren't trying to set any records, we were just trying to finish 1 century knowing that we had to do another century the next day. In terms of nutrition, we all bought various bars and gels and electrolytes, and we were sharing amongst ourselves, being sure to take in some calories every hour on the hour, roughly 200 to 400. Initially starting at 200, and then over the ride, based on my CGM that I was wearing, I was like, okay, I need to up the calories a little bit to stay in a good zone. A quick thing about the CGM, this is the Level CGM, and I talk about it right here. Love their device, love what they're making. The issue is that one morning when I woke up, apparently there was some issue with the sensor. I must have dislodged it while I was sleeping or shifted it or something, and it wasn't giving fully accurate readings. So I'm not gonna really make too many conclusions. I really wanted to see the nutrition, pre, during, post ride and have some analysis, but unfortunately can't really publish that because the data wasn't fully reliable. But based on whatever data I could gather and based on how I was feeling, I realized I needed to up my caloric intake. Another key learning here was how important a bike fit is. So 2 of us got proper bike fits done before the ride, and we were so glad we did. We were riding without pain, we were riding smoothly, no issues. One of my friends, kudos to him. He did both double centuries. He has the least cycling experience out of all of us. He did it on a chunkier bike. I think it's a gravel bike. Meteor tires, a little bit more rolling resistance. He still did it, and he did it without a bike fit, which is badass. But then every couple minutes, or not every couple minutes, every stop he needed to stop and stretch or roll out his back on a lacrosse ball. So it was painful, right? It wasn't an ideal situation. So I definitely recommend, if you are gonna do longer rides like this, get a professional bike fit. And yeah, how he even managed to do that, I don't know. Must have a really high pain tolerance. And then around, I wanna say 6 p.m. on that Tuesday, disaster strikes. We're at mile 88.5, unfortunately. First casualty. We got a flat on the rear, but no problem, we're gonna fix it. That friend gets a flat tire. Now he has tubeless tires and they have this goo inside of them, this gel that supposedly self-heals, but if the puncture is too large, the hole's too big, then it can't seal properly. So we spent a lot of time trying to fix it. Making friends on the bike ride. And we got the tire fixed, win-win. Yes. Ultimately, we just cleaned out the tire and replaced the tube, but we should have done that sooner because then we were riding back after dark. And riding, especially in these areas on single lane highways after dark, not safe, not ideal. And this raises another point, which is that there were certain sections that were dedicated for cyclists, for pedestrians, and those are safe, those are awesome. There's some really scenic, beautiful ones actually. But the issue is that when you're riding between Seattle and Portland, or really anywhere in the country between large cities, there's gonna be a lot of unprotected lanes, a lot of places where you're just riding on the shoulder, and there's cars, single lane highway, going 60 miles an hour right next to you. And that's the big reason why I probably wouldn't do this again. I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of sketch. Cars going so fast. Cars going 50. We're on this tiny ass shoulder. I do not feel safe, not nice. There is some safety in numbers. When you're doing it with a large group with STP, 10,000 cyclists, cars know that, hey, there's cyclists everywhere, I gotta be careful. At least, I feel like the risk is lower to be hit in those situations. Whereas when it's just a couple of guys riding, you know, someone's driving, they're texting, they don't see you, and if they hit you, like your life either changes permanently or your life ends. One of the two if you get hit. And that was really unnerving. There were a lot of situations where cars were way too close, well within 3 feet and going, you know, 50 miles an hour or faster. Now here's the interesting thing. On that first Century day, so we did 60 miles, then a break day, and then 100 miles. That first 100-mile day, it felt easier than the 60-mile day, which is, it's kind of weird. I'm not sure why. Maybe was the body adapting? I don't know if it can really recover fully from 60 miles in just 48 hours. Was it mostly just a mental thing? Possibly, because we had the expectation of, hey, 100 miles is gonna be hard, whereas for 60 miles, we said to ourselves internally that 60 miles is gonna be easy. So maybe the difference in expectations resulted in a very different experience for all of us. I think that was probably mostly it. But despite the shadiness, we got to the hotel late at night, no one was injured. It was a little bit of an adventure with the whole flat tire situation, but great success that first day. And then the second day was more of the same. One issue that a few of us faced was saddle discomfort, and especially on that first Century day towards the, say, the second half, because you're sitting on your saddle, putting pressure on it for like 6-7 hours on each Century day, and that takes a toll. So my saddle I actually really like. It's an ISM split nose, and it feels totally fine on my 30-mile or 40-mile or even 50-mile rides. And the reason I like it is because of the split nose. It doesn't put any pressure on your pudendal nerve, and you know, the whole erectile dysfunction and male issues that can result from that over long periods of time is something that I learned in med school and that I want to prioritize because that's important to me. So then the next morning we got ready for the second and final Century. Unfortunately, we didn't sleep that much that night, in large part because of the delays with the flat tire. We also went and got food. When we came back and like prepared the bikes and got our snacks ready and all that stuff, it was just late. I also had to do some med school insiders work because there was a little bit of an emergency I had to handle. And overall, not ideal. You want to really be prioritizing sleep when you do something like this. But the second day, it wasn't too bad. It was more or less the same, slow and steady. Again, we had the support vehicle at mile like 40 and mile 70. So 2 big stops where we refueled, repackaged, and we got more snacks in our jerseys and our saddlebags, and got more water. Stopped off at the Oriental Cafe for food. But since I'm terrible at vlogging, I can't show you the meal.
Why do I do this?
Very accurate impression of me 30 miles ago. These roads are so smooth! Oh my God, it's like I'm flying right now. This is gorgeous. And then we made it to Portland. And for some reason, my bike computer, it like shortchanges me my miles. So everyone else had 99.5 miles and we had, let's say, 0.3 miles to go. For me, I was at like mile 98. Even though we were all riding together, this always happens when I go on rides with people. My computer's always a little bit shorter in terms of the mileage. So then I was doing like loops around this park by myself to get me up to like 99.5 as well, or 99 point whatever, so that when we rode to the hotel and finished the ride, we could break 100. Because you don't want to finish a ride at mile 99.9 because then you didn't actually do a Century. You know what I mean? So we were all a few miles short at the end, like one and a half. I'm always shortest the most, which means that my computer underestimates how much I ride. So my friends are chilling right now, and I'm doing loops here, trying to get that 99.9 before we go over to the hotel to make it 100. And that's a wrap. 100.0, Hyatt Regency, Portland. Oh, hallelujah. Boys, we did it. That's a wrap. Obviously a much different video than what I normally do. Just wanted to share my experience and the things I learned. To summarize the things I learned, number one, if you are gonna do a really long ride like this and you're going on highways that are unprotected, I would recommend an organized group ride because there were definitely a lot of moments that felt shady. Number two, always carry tubes. 2 of us had 1 tube each, 2 of the guys had no tubes. Luckily it worked out, only 1 person got a flat, but this could have ended much, much worse. So always have tubes on any bike ride you go on. I just always keep at least 1 in my saddlebag, even for my 15 milers that I do. Number 3, exercise really is the cheat enabler. My CGM again was having some issues and was glitching out here and there. So I can't make some really hard conclusions, but I will say that when you're exercising this much, you can eat a lot and eat a lot of sugary or high carb things and still not spike a crazy amount, which is in line with what I had learned previously from shorter bike rides too. Number 4 is that if you do need to ship your bike, I think taking it in as a check-in on your flight is probably the best. They charge us, I think, like a $70, $75 fee with Southwest. The one thing that was kind of shady is that on the way there, they unbuckled the bikes and they were just like kind of shifting around, so some damage could have occurred. Luckily, nothing happened. It's also a good idea to use a fork spacer for your bike because you take off the front wheel and then the fork is like this. And if you get compression or traction on the fork, it can snap, especially if it's carbon. And I did not do that. It was higher risk. I didn't know about that until I got there. My friends told me, but it worked out. If I am gonna ship my bike again someplace, I will definitely be doing that. And number 5 is just, you know what? Sometimes it's cool just to say, it and do something that intimidates you a little bit, something that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone. That's where I think the most exciting memories are, the best life experiences. And was this super epic, super challenging? I mean, if you're a cyclist, you're like, you're not impressed at all. In fact, you're like, you guys had a support vehicle? Like what we did wasn't a big deal, but to us, for newbies, for people that were just getting started in this sport and haven't done things like this before, it felt awesome. It was an adventure, great memories. And I think for all of us, we felt like we could do more than we initially thought. We felt like, hey, we can keep riding another century the next day. Okay, maybe not that, but we did feel pretty good at the end of the ride. And these are the types of experiences that I just want to prioritize and make happen more now while I still can. Anyways, thanks for watching, much love, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Woo! Oh my God, 200 miles later. Man, dinner is gonna feel so good. Post-century meal. That's not mine though, but goddamn. Goddamn. I'm just working on this right now.